this show in Massachusetts because some of the migratory birds you see on the Georgia coast during spring end up months later in Cape Cod. Both Georgia and Massachusetts play a critical role in the amazing journeys these birds make every year. I am here at the invitation of Manomet conservation biologist Brad Wynn.
Yeah, exactly, yep. Salt marsh.
When Brad worked in Georgia, he often helped me with this program. We had long wanted to tell the story of incredible migrations. This trip presents that opportunity. Our goal here is to trap a Whimbrel, a beautiful shorebird that flies for days without stopping. We are on a marsh protected by the Massachusetts Audubon Society, where biologists set lines with little loops on the ends. If it works, the loop will catch the foot of an unsuspecting bird. The trap is set. Now it's just a waiting game. One that turned hours into days.
The birds we have tracked and tagged here in Massachusetts in the past have left here and gone out over the ocean. We had one that stopped at Nantucket for the day, spent a day on Nantucket, and then launched there, and its next stop was down in Virgin Islands. So it flew straight down over the Atlantic for about 5 days. So how are they doing that? We don't know.
Whimbrels on the Atlantic have been in decline for about the last 20 years. Georgia and Massachusetts are what scientists call staging areas for Whimbrels. A staging area is simply a place they hang out to rest and eat. Fiddler crabs in the marshes of both states are a favorite food source. They use that curved bill to snatch and swallow entire crabs.
So these birds are feeding, building up fat, building up muscle for flight. So the fat is the fuel, and the heavy muscles they have, they build up in a short period of time, are to take them through these long distances. We have seen them avoid storms, and we've also seen them go right in the middle of hurricanes at the same time. So somehow the ones we've been tracking seem to always know where they are in the ocean. And you can imagine going into the middle of a hurricane and then kind of getting blasted out the backside of the hurricane, and knowing where on the planet you really are enough to keep orienting toward land or a destination you know about. It's really extraordinary. And the fact that we don't know, we have ideas of how they're doing it, but we don't know, especially these juvenile birds. How the heck are these, what's going through their little heads? They're flying night and day over the ocean. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary.
It has been 3 days of watching and waiting. Finally, a Whimbrel steps in the right place. Someone always has eyes on that trap, so the bird is immediately rescued. The big grin on Alan Nidal's face says it all. This is a juvenile, exactly what they wanted. We are squeezed into Brad's car, now an impromptu laboratory. It's a bit crowded, but this environment is safe and keeps her out of the sun. Wing measurement?
I'd say 226.
226?
Yeah. I'm just confirming that this is indeed a juvenile bird, so that's what we want.
Alan holds the bird. I take the notes, but Brad has the tedious job of getting a $3,500 solar-charged transmitter securely on the back of this Whimbrel. Yeah, transmitter number 136619.
Yeah, I think that's about right there. We want it to be lined up with the center of the back. This is going to go right in the sacrum, which is like our hip bone.
Oh. How tight do you have it?
Not too tight, but we want it snug so that it will ride evenly in one place on the back. So it's snug, but not so it inhibits the bird from walking or flying at all.
This bird hatched from an egg on the frozen tundra in Canada. It flew from there to this marsh, a unique spot on the inside of Cape Cod and Wellfleet Bay. It's all about timing and the food source. Look at all the crabs. It is a magnet for hungry Whimbrels.
If you move your thumbs, this is kind of the moment of truth.
It's almost time to let this Whimbrel go. The tension is broken with humor.
It's promising.
That's promising.
A vibrant bird here.
We should name this one Sharon then, if it's got an attitude, you know.
Oh, nice. All joking aside, this Whimbrel will need a little attitude to make its first flight. How will it know where to go? Brad quickly carries the bird in a bag for a true test to see if she's really moving okay. So, Brad, you're just trying to figure out how the bird is moving in there before you let it go?
Yeah, exactly. I want to make sure the legs are okay and that it's looking alert, and so when we release it, it will go.
All right, 3, 2, 1. She walks out like a runway model. No rush, no stress, just a little tail shake. In a moment, I'll show you where she ends up. It is hard to believe.
But it's interesting, the adults migrate first through here, so the adults are here in July and August, and there might be a few around still, but by now in September, all the adults that are kind of the professional Whimbrels have already gone, so these younger birds are kind of figuring things out, so we want to be able to figure that out, figure out what they're figuring out at the same time.
How they know instinctively to go across the ocean.
Yeah, that one's a big one, and that's going to be many years before anybody really figures that out. How they can navigate hurricanes, how they can navigate across open ocean for 5 or 6 or 7 days flying nonstop. It's really pretty extraordinary for anything. So anyway, this is great. Thank you.
I want to see her fly.
You want to see it? Well, you might not. She's just out there doing her thing right now, so you might not see her fly.
That's okay as long as she's at you, but you feel good.
Oh yeah, no, she looked really good going out, and that shake she did, that's a relaxation thing that she's saying. Okay, yeah, things are good. Yeah, she's probably starting to feed right now in the marsh, and that's perfect. Yeah.
My trip was worth it.
Yeah, very good. So happy.
They named her Sachem. It means leader of tribes. Less than 2 weeks after capture, Sachem headed out to sea. Look at her path. Flying at about 30 miles per hour, she slid past Bermuda, stayed east of Hurricane Maria, went through the Caribbean, and as I write this story, Sachem is hanging out in Venezuela. She flew non-stop 4 days and around 2,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. No adult bird taught her what to do. This story began in 2010 when I was with Brad and Georgia biologist Tim Keyes on Ossabaw Island, once again trapping a Whimbrel.
Look at that wing. Look at the shape of the wing. That's a long distance wing right there.
Secondary 10, and then 5 breast feathers. All right.
Now, years later, Tim hopes to capture another bird that favors both states. Oystercatchers also need the marshes in Georgia and Massachusetts. Tim's crew is working off Tybee Island Causeway. Trapping can be exhausting. The birds need to be in just the right place, and you can't exactly put them there.
There we go. All right, they're up.
When they land, a cannon shoots a net into the air. Then it is pandemonium as volunteers get the birds out of the net and into safe enclosures.
They're gorgeous. I mean, black head, brown back, bright yellow and red eye, bright orange bill. So they're a real crowd pleaser.
Two teams work to put different types of bands on the birds. One is metal with a unique code unlike that on any other bird. Another band is color-coded so it can be spotted by birdwatchers and reported to the oystercatcher working group.
These are American oystercatchers, a highly charismatic coastal shorebird that nests in Georgia and up and down the Atlantic and Gulf coasts. In Georgia, we typically have about 120 nesting pairs a year, and in winter we get wintering birds from all up and down the coast. We get birds from Massachusetts to South Carolina that overwinter here, and we average around 1,000 wintering birds each winter, so we're probably more important for the overall species in winter.
From this type of banding, scientists have learned that these birds are migrating much farther than previously thought.
We actually banded a chick last summer that wound up in Panama, and there's a growing understanding of the fact that some of these wintering oystercatchers are making it to Central America. There's been 7 or 8 birds seen from Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and Massachusetts, in Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and now Panama.
Oystercatchers are a species of concern among folks who work with shorebirds. There are only about 11,900 American oystercatchers in the whole Atlantic and Gulf Coast population. They are vulnerable because they nest on beaches like this that are heavily used by people. And they have a lot of predators.
We've confirmed ghost crabs getting small chicks, certainly raccoons and mink and opossum. If the beaches where there's foxes, which we don't have a lot of, but in the mid-Atlantic states, foxes are one of their main predators. And then avian predators would include great horned owls will take adults, peregrine falcons will take adults, bald eagles will probably take adults, and then of course any of the young chicks as well. We had a radio tagged oystercatcher that we pulled out of at the top of a live oak. The transmitter was up in the top of a tree. The great horned owl had grabbed it, flown it a couple miles up the beach, and eaten it in the top of a live oak. But having said that, adult survival is generally pretty high with these guys, and it's really the first year where there's highest mortality.
A large network of volunteers and organizations work long hours to track migratory birds. It is quite possibly the key to their survival. If we don't know where they go, we won't know what lands to protect. Later, on a spring day, off the Jekyll Island Causeway, we are once again with Tim Keyes. The target bird for this capture and tagging is a salt marsh sparrow.
From a conservation perspective, the highest concern is with the 2 subspecies of salt marsh sparrow, because they're completely dependent on salt marsh habitat, and in sort of the core of their breeding range is a lot of salt marsh habitat loss, and there's not marsh retreat occurring. So there's not new marsh being created on the uphill side of these marshes. So marsh is dying off faster than it's being replaced, and some estimates suggest that the decline in salt marsh sparrow has been up to 9% annually, which is massive decline. So that's a species that's really of high conservation concern.
Capturing marsh sparrows is hard work.
So our goal this week is to catch as many salt marsh sparrows as we can. Certainly anything that we catch that already is banded, do not let go until we've read that band. I think the key is going to be to get lots of net sets and drags. I think most of you have done this before in one way or another, but we're basically setting nets perpendicular to this brushy marsh edge full of sea oxeye or black needle rush. We've got a long rope with jugs on it, and we kind of spread out and march down this edge, pushing all the birds that are roosting in here at high tide into our net.
As the tide rises, water pushes the birds up into the marsh grasses. Nets are set to block their exit.
We want someone right at the net. But this creek edge is going to be a magnet for them. So I think we want to kind of spread out along this edge.
Then folks get behind them and flush the birds forward into the nets.
So that folks who are on the drag line stay well away from the bushes where the birds are, walking that way. We don't want to push anything away. So just get up on the short grass and then head up probably to that single pole, and we'll start the drag from that single pole. Yeah, let those things drag on the ground. Let the ropes drag on the ground.
Once stuck in the mesh, they are carefully removed from the net. Hold on, little baby.
So it's kind of counterintuitive, but it actually is often easier to pull a wing right through.
Now I'm caught.
Yeah. See that? Yeah, if you can loop that, you can get that little...
This?
Yeah, and just move it off the wing. The wing should come right through. Yeah.
Then they are put into cotton bags. They go through an assembly line of sorts where they are banded and released.
Negative.
93043.
93043. It's 93045.
You want me to take another one?
Sure.
This one just bit me.
Good for it. Got some spunk.
It did, it bit me. All right, you ready?
I don't know.
Trouble is, there are several similar species in this marsh.
Swamp sparrow. You want to ban the swamp?
Are any of these salt marsh sparrows, or are they different?
These are all seasides in one swamp.
And the
We haven't caught one yet that we want to tag.
After hours, we have yet to see the bird we're after, and the gnats are unrelenting. Even so, Tim isn't giving up. Nets are moved, and the process is repeated.
Okay, that may be a little deep. You all right? Let's swing this net even more then, just get it out of this really soft stuff.
Wow. It's like up to my knees in that.
I think we're good.
Come on, bird.
Where'd they all go? There were birds in here. There were birds in here.
Come on.
Where are they? There they are. Woo! Wow!
And finally, in this batch, there is a salt marsh sparrow.
Come on.
Ultimately, they end up with 4 of the elusive birds.
So it's salt marsh. And the band is 2401-57360. And make a note that on the lower left, orange band with a pit tag.
One bird had been captured before in Maine, but those bands are removed and all 4 salt marsh sparrows get a Nano tag. The signal from this transmitter will actually be picked up by radio towers along the eastern seaboard. That is so tedious.
It's not so bad.
I think I would be terrified.
First one of the year is always a learning experience. Relearning how to do it. Sometimes another set of hands is helpful too, but speaking of which, Tim, you wanna feed its foot through that loop from the bottom?
It is also critical to get a tag that isn't too heavy for the bird. These little guys only weigh as much as 9 or 10 pennies, yet they fly all the way from the south to the coast of Maine.
Tag to contend with too. There is a network of receivers, stationary receivers, that are just listening all the time.
So you can also track how quickly it's moving along.
Exactly, yep.
That's very cool.
And we can tell, okay, it was picked up at Kiowa Island in South Carolina, but then we didn't get it in New Jersey until 2 weeks later, so it probably stopped over somewhere between South Carolina and New Jersey for a while.
And the towers are operated by different people, but there's partnerships. Everybody's willing to share the data they're collecting through these towers.
What you do is poke a hole in the trash bag, or like just uncover a little bit of...
This guy's feisty and biting, so we're good to
Tim,
go.
you want to keep it?
Yeah, keep it, definitely.
It is delicate work, essentially putting a backpack around the thighs of these tiny birds. One by one, they are fitted and their feathers groomed for flight.
You want to turn him loose?
So he actually has all this we could talk to. He did a project in Dragonfly.
Tomorrow, where are you going to be tomorrow?
Sure it flies all right.
The plan was to just work the causeway tomorrow.
Beautiful.
I'll have to look at Janet.
The people who follow bird migrations, many of them volunteers, are passionate about the mission. It helps researchers understand the birds they are trying to save. For example, today, a salt marsh sparrow from Maine was recaptured here. But earlier in the year, a Georgia bird was recaptured in Connecticut. It all helps with habitat protection.
Red knots are another classic long-distance migrant, basically a robin-sized bird, so now we're talking smaller than a Whimbrel. And these birds, some of them nest within 500 miles of the North Pole and winter all the way in southern South America. So these birds really traverse the entire hemisphere. And it really gives you the sense that for a lot of these birds, as long as they've got a good food resource, geographic distance doesn't really mean that much to them. As long as they can get the food that they need, and really when you're talking about shorebird conservation, the real critical thing is protecting those key feeding areas where they're able to put on the weight, whether it's fiddler crabs in Georgia in spring for Whimbrel or horseshoe crab eggs in spring for a number of different species. They need that resource to be easily available and abundant so that they can put on the weight to make the last legs of their journey.
Georgia has a tremendous amount of salt marsh and some laws to protect them. But many of the marshes in Massachusetts have been filled.
A lot of Massachusetts salt marshes have been filled over time with the population that's up here. And over time, Boston, for instance, was built on top of a salt marsh. So before we had the wherewithal, the knowledge of the value of salt marshes, we as a society thought of marsh as wasteland and filled a lot of it. So what we have now we're working are much smaller, we call them pocket marshes, and we've had to go and find where the birds are coming in.
Marshes have a unique smell. and tides that constantly change the lay of land. You have to spend time here to appreciate the shapes and colors of every changing hour. Birds don't need convincing. They flock here, perhaps knowing better than we the rich bounty that lies within these grasses. From Georgia and Massachusetts, I'm Sharon Collins. We'll see you next time.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by grants from the Georgia Natural Resources Foundation, the Imlay Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, and from viewers like you.